Initiating Movieboys podcast. Still loading. Tempest and Ryan are on their way. Welcome. Please enjoy the show.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Movieboys. My name is Ryan, and I'm here with my co-host Tempest.
Hey, how's it going?
This is an exciting day for the podcast because we're going to be talking about one of my favorite meme beat 'em up movies of all time, Rocky IV. And we're actually going to be talking about specifically the director's cut that Stallone worked on editing during the pandemic, because I guess that's what you do if you're 70 something years old, you're bored in a pandemic and you're rich and your director Sylvester Stallone, you just re-edit your old movies. So I think I talked to you about this before, but is this your first time seeing this movie, or have you seen it before?
All right, okay. Get ready.
Oh shit, I'm ready.
Yeah, so my mother was absolutely obsessed with Rocky growing up. So I've kind of consumed all of the Rocky movies in bits and pieces because she was always watching them, and like, you know, when you're a kid and like you're just kind of there. But this going into like a larger stupid thing that I did when I was a kid, I didn't realize that some movies were fiction. And for the longest time, I thought that all movies were documentaries. And I thought that the Rocky series was actually Sylvester Stallone being a boxer, and like his boxing name was Rocky. And I thought this up until about third grade.
That's honestly amazing. So Rocky was very, very real to you for a really long time. I kind of love that, honestly.
Yeah, I legitimately thought for the longest time that these were just like old documentaries of Rocky, who was also Sylvester Stallone. And I didn't understand that this was just like a made up story. I didn't understand that a lot of movies were made up for a long time. I don't know why. Like, I think the one that was probably the worst was, I thought Indiana Jones were also all documentaries.
Another case where I definitely wish that they were. I really want to believe that the Rocky and Indiana Jones are real. I think I definitely went through a period where I thought the same thing though. So I don't think you're alone there. And then I definitely went through a period where I thought that they kind of just made it up as they went. Like, I didn't really understand the concept of, oh no, they like script these things out and they plan them out. It was like, no, they're kind of just making it up as they go. It's like playtime. You know what I mean?
But did you think it up until you were in third grade? Because I think that's embarrassing. Like, what are you in third grade? Like 8?
I think I was a little younger than that, but still, I honestly though, I feel like that's kind of a beautiful thing on some level. I really wish like so many of my heroes would have been like real to me for longer than they were, I guess.
So to go back to your question and answering it, like, is this the first time I've seen it? This is the first time I've actually like sat down as an adult and like watched a Rocky movie the whole way through. I saw Creed in theaters, so like, you know, I had that experience, but I've never really like actually like dedicated time to like sit down and watch like a full movie, because they were always just kind of on in the background when I was growing up as a kid. Also, my mom was like obsessed with like retelling all the Rocky movies. So I feel like I have this weird like memory of like my mom telling me the story of Rocky as a kid and then thinking that it was real, but then realizing later that it was just like a made up story. I don't know. It's very weird. So the director's cut of Rocky IV is like basically the only one that I know.
That's crazy to me. So I guess I can kind of give you, like, I don't know how much how much you looked into it before or afterwards. I think that Rocky IV is like just this 80s insane fever dream of a movie. And I think that Sylvester Stallone with this director's cut was trying to kind of like pull back, believe it or not, like he was trying to kind of peel that away, because the first Rocky movie is very, very grounded and just a very grounded drama. I mean, it won, I don't know if it won Best Picture. I'll look this up later, but it definitely won Oscars. Like, it's a very grounded, like low key movie. And the second one is the same. The third one is where it starts to kind of escalate, and you get to see Rocky fighting Mr. T and all the craziness that comes with that. But I feel like this movie, which was one that Stallone directed and wrote on his own, it kind of just reached the height of its ridiculousness. And it's also when he made the crazy third Rambo movie too. I think this was around the same time where things just started to get so excessive and over the top. And I mean, a lot of that is still definitely here in the director's cut. But I feel like especially after, I don't know, did you see Creed 2?
I have not seen Creed 2. It's on my list.
Yeah, Creed 2, I don't know if you know this, but also kind of follows the story of Ivan Drago and now his son, who ends up fighting Apollo Creed's son. And it's sort of like very heavily connected to this movie. So I almost think that Stallone kind of wanted to go back to this movie during quarantine, during the big quarantine during COVID, to try to kind of make it fit a little bit better and make it a little bit more serious. And I think that he succeeded in some ways and not in others. But I guess I kind of just at first we can just sort of give our general thoughts on the movie itself, and just sort of talk about it.
I don't think I like this movie.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah, I think like I like bits of it, but overall, so I had this friend recently who told me that he doesn't like watching movies that were made before the 90s. He's like, and then I didn't understand what he meant for the longest time. And I think it's this. It's like the Rocky IV energy of movies that came out in like the 80s that are just not fun to rewatch in a way. Like,
yeah.
I think there's parts of this movie that I enjoy just for like the meme of it. Like there's a lot of quotable like moments from this movie, but as a whole, I have no interest in like going back and like like rewatching this movie. I think like the things that I liked the most was like the Living in America, like the big set piece, because I just love big set pieces in movies, like a lot of coordination, like, you know, everyone doing like a big production like that. I enjoy that. Like in any movie ever, like it doesn't matter what it's about, I always enjoy that. And then like the training montage and like little bits of moment, I'm like, okay, this isn't so bad. And then like some of the fights are okay, but overall, I'm not like, man, I can't wait to go back and watch Rocky IV again. Like it's the blatant, like weird Cold War propaganda is almost unrealistic. Like when they're in Russia and then like the crowd, which is full of Russians, starts cheering for Rocky. That would never fucking happen. Never.
Oh yeah.
Never.
And I feel like, okay, I guess this is a full disclosure moment. There is some of this that I do kind of enjoy, ironically, I will say. But it's like it's so difficult because I'm trying to think of the experience that I initially had watching this movie for the first time. I feel like when I was a little kid and I saw this, I was like, this is just badass. This is awesome. Like it's crazy. It's just because I think the way that I describe this movie to people in the director's cut is more or less the same sort of thing. Like the other Rocky movies are like kind of serious, especially the first two in Creed are dramas with occasional montages. But Rocky IV is kind of just like a long montage with occasional drama parts that they have to get out of the way. And I think I kind of enjoy, like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like the idea that he would sort of bring this crowd during the Cold War to its feet and like be able to turn them around. But I guess there's just some element of, and again, I was, okay, I'm going to go back to what I was saying a minute ago. I think that at first I really did enjoy this because it's like, this is badass. This is awesome. And then as I got older, I was like, this is kind of where Stallone went off the rails. But then I got even older and I was like, there's part of me that enjoys the corniness and the ridiculousness of watching something that was made as like a weird, crazy over the top propaganda piece in the 80s. And it does kind of get me going a little bit in a weird way. Like it's super like that sounds
like in a patriotic way.
Not in a patriotic way, but it's just like it feels like weirdly inspiring. Like if the other Rocky movies play more into what makes his life difficult and kind of sad, and what makes, you know, because in the very first Rocky movie, Apollo Creed is his opponent, and he's sort of like this Muhammad Ali type of over the top character, and you sort of see that with the Living in America scene, and Rocky is given a chance, like out of nowhere. It's essentially like a lottery, and he's considering this to be this ridiculous exhibition fight. He just gives this random guy from Philly a shot, And the whole movie is him training and trying to kind of like live up to the moment, even though it's kind of seen as a joke. And he ends up losing. Sorry, spoilers, everyone, for a million-year-old movie. But he loses at the end of the first Rocky movie, and that's kind of like a beautiful thing. But he lasts throughout the fight, and he goes the distance, and that's what's so exciting about it. And as the Rocky series has gone on, it's just become such a silly, ridiculous, like soap opera, essentially. And I think again, it comes to a head in this movie where they're not taking it seriously anymore. It's so over the top. And I think that some of the things I'll get into later, like the changes that I noticed, I think a lot of the changes kind of make the movie worse, at least for me, because it's like Stallone trying to strip away the 80s corniness of the movie that was there before. And just the kind of, even the way that because the coverage that he chooses when he's editing the movie, like the shots are not as like, he chooses way less close-ups and like super dramatic, intense shots. And he tries to kind of pull back, which something that, I mean, you've seen the Creed movies. I feel like they're a little bit more realistic, the way that they look. And I think he tried to do that with this, but that's not the way that this was conceived. And I feel like it made it a little bit more awkward for me. But I guess I guess that's what I enjoy. What I enjoy about this movie is it's almost like a weird Rocky simulator. It's like it tries to make you feel like you're in these training scenes with him, like these ridiculous training scenes with him, like they go on for so long. Like this training scene is insane towards the end of the movie. And I kind of, that's like really my favorite scene of the entire movie is when he's,
it's great.
The corny scene where he's training in Russia, because it stops and then it just keeps going. And every time you think it's over, it's like, no, this is going to fucking keep going, whether you like it or not. That's kind of the stuff that I do have fun with. But I will fully admit it is like a ridiculous overly patriotic piece of Cold War propaganda. And I mean, tankies would definitely hate it. I can say that for sure.
I thought it was interesting how it's like Ivan Drago is got like all this state of the art like equipment, and he's like a machine.
Yeah,
he's doing steroids at one point, right? Like I'm not misremembering that. Like
for sure. Yeah, there's a moment where he's shooting up, which is very funny and ironic. And I joked to Michelle when I was rewatching this, my girlfriend Michelle, and was just like, dude, Stallone was fucking roiding the fuck up for this. Are you kidding me? Like they're trying to play it off like, oh man, the Americans though, we're the honest ones. We're outside. He's chopping wood, which is again badass. I love it. I love the meme of it kind of. But like, come on, dude. Stallone, he's admitted to it. He's absolutely like he was the most jacked he's ever been in this fucking movie. There's no way he wasn't doing steroids. He's admitted as much. Like, which is just funny looking back, you know.
I just think that was interesting how it's like pure propaganda of like I'm a good honest American. I'm gonna train like in nature, like I'm a bear, like how God intended. I don't fucking know.
And really like what? Okay, I actually am realizing I never did like my little intro that I wrote describing the plot, which is that after Rocky Balboa's trainer Apollo Creed, who it's kind of like his rival turned trainer, they sort of they kind of go into that a little bit in the intro, but after he's murdered in this exhibition match by this Russian newcomer Ivan Drago, he wants revenge. And honestly, like that, there's really not much else other than that. Like that's really it. And
it's very simple.
It's so simple, and it's really like you could cut out some dramatic scenes and just play this on MTV as like a music video almost. Like it's very, very funny. And it's one of those things that I'm not sure if all of my love for it might honestly be tied to the fact that I watched this movie when I was little and I kind of was pumped up by it. Like maybe that's why it still gets me going, but just like the soundtrack and just so many of the montages are so fun. I guess my ultimate sort of recommendation for this would be if you like Rocky IV and if you're a fan of it, I think it's interesting to watch the director's cut, but I feel like so much of it, I feel like the mission that Stallone had at the beginning, which is kind of to like ground Rocky IV more, was a hindrance. And I think if you saw more of the original cut, you would probably agree with me. Like
they got rid of the robot. Cutting
the silly robot out. Like that was such a, I understand it on some level because it really doesn't add anything to the plot or to the silliness of like the actual story itself. but it's just, I don't know. It was it's such a goofy, memorable scene. I think everyone remembers that scene when they think back to Rocky IV. They think of the ridiculous robot singing "Happy Birthday" to Polly, and I feel like removing that, it's kind of just indicative of a lot of the changes. And I feel like, so after I watched the director's cut, I remember being like, I honestly enjoyed a lot of like certain changes leading up to the main fight. Like there were a lot more scenes with Carl Weathers, which is something that I really enjoyed, who's plays Apollo Creed. There was a lot more. I feel like they gave him a lot more agency in the director's cut, and I think that it's too bad that a lot of these scenes were cut from the original movie, because I feel like in the original it is more focused on Rocky, and the decision that Apollo makes to essentially do this ridiculous fight of this guy who is like clearly a lot taller than him, heavier than him, not a real fight that anyone would ever allow to happen. Even the fight Rocky against Drago is not a fight that the boxing commission would ever allow to happen. Like they're too their sizes are way too different.
It's like the modern day fights with Logan Paul and
Yeah.
Jake Paul, where they're like fighting people who are not in their weight class whatsoever.
No, and they are like when he fought Mayweather, one of the Logan brothers. It's just like these are clearly just ridiculous exhibition fights. Like there's really no way the actual boxing commission would have let them fight in the end. But just giving him a little bit more agency, and there was like a scene in the beginning where he talks about how like he doesn't really have anything else. Like a lot of those little moments were actually not in the original version, and I thought that some of them were pretty good. One of them I found to be really, really cringy was where, and this wasn't in the original version, Rocky says to Adrian, like, "I allow you to be a woman and you need to allow me to be a man." It's like that line was like so cringy and stand out to me that I was like, this was definitely not in the original version. And I feel uncomfortable like having watched it. But the living in America scene, sort of leading up to Apollo Creed coming out, is they kind of drag it out in this new version a little bit more, and they kind of show that Adrian and Apollo's wife are almost made a little bit more nervous by it, like by their reactions, and that's something that wasn't in the original either. They kind of just look like pumped up and happy about it, and I thought that was kind of cool. I feel like it kind of gave them a little bit more character in this. And also they change essentially the moment where Rocky has a chance to throw in the towel. They kind of put the blame more on him in the original version, which in this one they kind of show that he's already been knocked down, and then he kind of decides, I don't even know if they even show him throwing in the towel, but in the original they keep showing that he's like restraining and not throwing in the towel to end the fight that kills Apollo. And they kind of put the blame more on him in the original version, which I thought was an interesting choice. Like it made me wonder, and given what happens in Creed 2, I feel like it's a retcon that he's trying to do, weird story reasons, but at the same time it kind of gives a little bit more agency to Apollo and makes it more like his choice to put on this ridiculous fight, even though if he knows that there's no chance for him to actually win it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know if you feel this way at all, but I feel like it's really disturbing that he just dies. And I don't even know how necessary it was. Like, it just feels so... What do you call it? Like, when someone just gets killed to, like, further the plot of someone, like, fridging? It almost feels like fridging. Like,
yeah, I absolutely see that.
I don't really think he even needed to die. Like, he could have just been, like, very, like, injured or, like, I don't know, something else. Especially, too, with the juxtaposition of the crazy, over-the-top, gaudy living in America scene where he's, like, fucking dancing with that bowl behind him. Like,
yeah.
Like, and then he just dies, like, 10 minutes later. And it just feels, like, tonally very weird to me. Like, maybe it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. I mean, obviously it is as he dies, but it's just... I don't know. I don't think he really needed to die. It just feels kind of... It just makes me feel icky. I don't know how else to explain it.
And that, I think, just goes back to the whole... Because, yeah, it would have been totally fine what if he was just, he was severely paralyzed from it. I think that could have got the same, like, sort of point across, or if he was just really hurt from it. and just shattered by it in some way. Like just him losing, like maybe his, I don't know, maybe he's still, but like I think it goes back to just the utter like ridiculousness of this movie being like, you know, it has to be the most dramatic soap opera-y option. You know what I mean? Like it has to die in the ring in Rocky's arms. You know what I mean? Like it goes back to that.
I feel like it would have been maybe better if they just had him going into a coma.
Yeah, and I feel like they didn't do that because I could be completely wrong on this. I haven't really seen Rocky 3 in a while, but I feel like his trainer goes into a coma. Rocky's trainer goes into a coma.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why they didn't do that. But that would also be like a soap opera-y option. You know, I completely agree with that.
I don't know. I feel like when you look at the first two Rocky films, like Apollo is such an important character, and to have him just be essentially murdered for like no goddamn good reason, it just feels so shitty. Like it feels like cartoon evil. It's like, okay, how do we get the point across that the Russians are bad? He's gonna kill Apollo. Like that's just what it comes across for me.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, believe it or not, I mean, this is the version you saw, but they actually gave him a little bit more to do in the story in this movie. Like, he's really not in the original cut very much in the beginning. He's kind of just in his pool at his mansion, and he sees that this Russian guy is kind of making the news and is like, I'm going to fight him. And there's really not much else. So I think, honestly, Stallone was trying to go back and see what he could do to give him a little bit more agency. Obviously, you can't change the fact that he was killed. Like, there's really no way to do that in the edit. But like, he did include a lot more scenes with Apollo, and I think that it was honestly his attempt with the Creed movies. The fact that the Creed movies, like, really, I feel like we're also so grounded in the way that the early Rocky movies were and were really powerful. I feel like he was trying to go back and give him a little bit more agency, or at least like as much as he could. But there's only so much you can do because of the way that this was written and conceived. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and you can only re-edit the film with existing footage. It's not like they're gonna go back and use the de-aging technology and like redo shots for the film.
Right. And I don't know. I think that this is a very weird and kind of interesting experiment, this director's cut. And I will say, if you would not like the original version, like, for sure, I'm not going to recommend it to you, because I don't think that I think that if anything, this kind of tones down a lot of the stupid shit in the original. And I think that it is interesting I feel like I would like to see certain directors do this with movies. It's just kind of an interesting, like, experiment from a fan's perspective, just to see, like, looking back, however many years it was, I mean, definitely decades it was, just how they see their work now and what they maybe would have done a little bit differently. Like, even from the title card and the intro, it's just so drastically different. Like the original intro for Rocky 4 is like a boxing glove, like, and it's done with practical effects. This boxing glove with an American flag on it slowly turning over with all the smoke surrounding it, and then like another boxing glove with like the Soviet sickle symbol on it, and they just like collide and explode, and then the title appears. That was the original title card. And it's like, there's so many ridiculous over the top things that I think he looked back and kind of was trying to see, like, and it's an interesting experiment to see, like, could I go back and make this over the top, gaudy, crazy movie a little bit more subdued and kind of fit with Creed and Creed 2? And the answer is no. And you probably shouldn't. There's really no way to do that unless you're gonna rewrite it and shoot it again, because it was clearly made to be this. It's a product of the 80s, and there's only so much you can do to change that. And even in the final fight scene, I actually went back after I watched this director's cut and rewatched the final fight scene, because I was like, I remember it being way more exciting in the original version. Like, I think that I felt like the music was way better and just louder and just there wasn't as much of a focus on what the characters were even saying. The music was just blasting so loud, and like the sound effects were so crazy. And I was right. I went back and watched the original, and like the music in this version is so low in the mix. And it was, again, he was trying to give it that more subdued kind of realistic feel that the Creed movies have. I think that while it is an interesting experiment, I think that it's such a relic of the 80s, and you can only do so much to actually to change it at this point,
This is like completely not related to anything we've talked about so far. I never realized how hot Dolph Lundgren is when I was
Dude,
watching.
this was peak Dolph Lundgren, man.
Yeah, like he looks really fucking good. I'm usually not really into like jacked guys with flat top haircuts, but damn, he looked really fucking good. Even Sylvester Stallone looks good. I think he's one of the like do you feel like Sylvester looks better the older he gets?
I kind of think that he does. Yeah, I agree with that. This was definitely him at his roidiest and also mumbliest. Like there are some lines where I had to put the subs on because I was like, what exactly did he say there?
I always watch movies with subtitles just because I feel like sometimes I have a hard time hearing in general. So
especially in some of the dramatic scenes with Adrian, he's like, it's like, what the dude? What I don't know what you're saying. You're gonna have to speak up a little bit more.
Oh my god, did you watch like old school Family Guy?
Oh yeah.
There was you have to like Google this clip afterwards where they're making fun of the way that Sylvester Stallone talks, and they did like a fake movie where it was him and Arnold and they're like gay lovers in like an English boarding school for boys. And it's like it's like a weird like the cutaway gag, and I don't know, you just made me think of that when you did the voice. Anyway, back to the movie.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that they do in the director's cut, I don't know how interesting me like pointing out the differences is, honestly, but another thing that they do a little bit differently is they actually give Dolph Lundgren more lines. Believe it or not, he had less lines in the original. Like they give him like a couple other little moments, and they cut to him a lot more during Rocky's final speech. Like watching them both back to back, I noticed that. And I think that, again, it's because he's in Creed 2, and they really give him more of an arc in Creed 2. And like they give him more of a nice little story of wanting to protect his son and not see his son as just like a tool to make him look better because of his sort of failed legacy against Rocky in Creed 2. So I think that, again, I think it's him I think this is Stallone looking back going like, I need to give this guy a little bit more in this movie because in the new movie, he's a little bit more of like an actual character,
Well, like in this movie, he's basically like a weapon of the Russian state to be like, we're fucking amazing. Look at our Giga Chad of a boxer.
Yeah.
Like, he's almost like not really a person. He's just kind of like a symbol or like a weapon, basically. Which is, I don't know. There's some interesting commentary right there. So it's interesting hearing that you keep pointing out all these changes, and I looked it up, and isn't there only like 2 minutes of footage difference between the two films? Like 2 minutes that were cut out, but you're saying a lot of the stuff is just like them redoing the angles of how like shots were filmed.
That is a lot of it. Yeah. I feel like, and it's weird. This version is actually shorter. But you're right. There's not like anything drastic, but I personally notice just in the, it is interesting just from like a filmmaking standpoint, just to see like how different like shot selection can sort of make it. It's an attempt to make it feel more grounded, even though you just can't with this story,
What is your general opinion about director's cuts? Like, I know you were saying earlier how it's like an interesting experiment, but like, do you feel that way? Like in general, like, do you prefer to watch the director's cuts of movies that come out in general, or are you like the theatrical cut is the way you go?
It's honestly, I saw a take from Taika Waititi recently on Twitter, and he said all director's cuts are bad, basically. And I have no, because people were asking him, oh, do you want to do a Thor Love and Thunder director's cut? Because a lot of people are saying that certain gore scenes were cut. And he was like, no, all director's cuts are usually bad. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that most of the time they're kind of like masturbatory. And I think this is kind of masturbatory. I feel like it's unnecessary, but as someone like who is really into movies, I find it interesting. I think there are very, very, very few instances where I'm like, okay, the director's cut, this is the definitive version to watch. I really think there are more instances where the director's cut kind of ruins a movie. Like I don't know if you're into Donnie Darko, but the director's cut of Donnie Darko is horrible. It is honestly. It makes me not want to go back and watch the original movie. It's so pretentious and just awful.
What's bad about it?
I feel like it over explains like it literally cuts to pages of a book throughout the movie where it's just text you have to read that explains what's going on. And I think what I enjoy about the original is the ambiguity. And I think that's something that in most movies, if it's something that's a little bit more left ambiguous, I think that can be like a positive thing, especially in horror or like more like supernatural movies. I think that can be like a huge plus or something that can work to a movie's advantage. I feel like over explaining every single little detail kind of pulls away from it. I like when audiences and when I'm able to walk away from a movie and have a discussion and try to like kind of interpret it and figure it out myself. I don't want to be spoon fed all the information. I feel like there are a lot of director's cuts in general that do that I just feel like are a little bit indulgent and kind of show a little bit more than needs to be shown. And this is, I don't know, this is a very weird director's cut because it really is, there aren't like massive changes. It's just, there's a couple extra scenes and it's a lot of just different angles that you're seeing. So it is interesting, but in general, I do feel like director's cuts are usually kind of unnecessary.
Do you think that if someone has only seen the more recent like Creed and Creed 2 movies, that going back and watching this, they'd be happy with it? Or no, you don't think so?
So is this someone who hasn't really seen the Rocky movies, I guess?
Yeah, like maybe someone who's like younger and they've only seen like the newer ones and they're like, oh, there was older movies, go back and watch them. Like, do you think the director's cut is for like people who watch the Creed movies first?
Honestly, I had not thought of that coming into our discussion, but maybe. I really don't know. I have like kind of an affinity for the original because of how silly it is, but I don't know, maybe the ridiculous robot scene and just some of the sillier stuff in the original version would turn people off. Maybe this really is good for people who aren't familiar. Like I feel like I can't really speak to that because I just don't have I can't like undo like sort of what I've seen, but maybe it would be better for people who weren't as familiar with it. Like I feel like there is, and I was thinking about this as I was finishing the movie and as I rewatched some of the scenes from the original cut. I think that there's like a happy medium cut that someone could make if someone wanted to make like a fan cut, because I think there's some scenes instead. I mean, this is completely insane and no one would ever do this, maybe except for me. But I feel like there are some deleted scenes from this movie and some angles that I would love to see in the original cut. And there's some things in the original cut where I wouldn't really mind if they were gone. So I think that there is a happy medium in here somewhere. And I think you could have something that you could make something that's better than both of these movies if you kind of cobbled the two together, and something that would be kind of perfect for someone who's just a fan of the Creed movies. But I don't know if anyone wants to take the time to do that, but there are some crazy fans out there who might want to. But it is also interesting to look at this because, I mean, Drago came back in Creed 2 and they are going to do a spinoff, whether Stallone likes it or not, of Drago and his son, which I don't. I thought it sounded cool when I thought that Stallone was involved somehow, but the fact that they're not even really consulting him at all just feels kind of gross.
Oh, wasn't he also very vocally pissed off about it too? Like he was kind of like fuck you, basically. Did
Yeah.
he say so? Yeah.
He was very, very pissed. And I understand that. I mean, even if he doesn't technically fully own the rights to the franchise, I still think that he is like he's obviously like the godfather of the franchise. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
can't really like make it. I feel like he could tank this Drago movie if he wanted to. Like he could completely, if he went on a crazy social media campaign, like they're not like, I have to think that the executives at MGM or wherever the fuck Rocky is right now, I have to think that they're like fighting really hard to get him on board, because it's such bad PR to have Stallone coming out and saying that he's against it. Like it's his, you know, this is his franchise, and it's crazy how many movies have been in this franchise in general.
How many original Rocky films are there? Is it 5?
It's 6, because
There's 6. Oh my god,
1 through 5, and then you have Rocky Balboa, and then you have Creed 1 and 2.
So that's 8. Is that 8? Is that 8 films? Gee.
It's crazy. I really do think that if I were to look back at the entire franchise, I think the first Creed movie is honestly one of the best of them, maybe the best. But
I really liked it. I saw it in theaters with my mom.
of course, yeah. But I do, again, I feel like, how do you feel about director's cuts? Have you seen a lot of director's cuts?
I think the only director's cut that I liked was the director's cut of Watchmen, the Zack Snyder Watchmen.
That's a good one.
Which have you seen that? Did you enjoy it? I think it was needed, just because, like, realistically, like, the Watchmen movie shouldn't have been a movie. It should have just been like a TV series. And then also, maybe not even then, because Alan Moore has like so many issues with it. But like, I feel like the director's cut just added in all of the extra scenes, like from the graphic novel, that didn't go into the theatrical cut. So that's, but in general, like, whenever I think of going back years after something has come out, I think of like George Lucas, like, fucking around with all the Star Wars movies. I don't know. I think, like, as a creative, obviously it makes sense that you'd want to go back and, like, you know, maybe spruce some things up or change some things if you have new ideas. But I think the originals should still be, like, available.
Yeah. And I think the fact that, I think that's what doesn't bother me about Stallone going back and doing this. It seems like he didn't name it, because it would bother me if he was like, this is Rocky 4 now. And which is kind of what George Lucas does. That's the annoying thing about him, is like, but this is like, it's like Rocky 4, Drago versus Rocky, or whatever the fuck the tagline is. And I think I think that's fine. I think if he wants to release it and say there's a little documentary about it on YouTube about him re-editing it that I actually have not watched, but I think that I think it's an interesting experiment, and as long as you're not, because I feel like George Lucas went back and like really changed things, and like was adding shit that was just like, okay, you're just adding CG and weird scenes that don't need to exist, you know. And this is more like trying to change the tone of a movie, and I find it kind of fascinating, but even if it is unnecessary. Like I agree. I think director's cuts like Watchmen, and I don't know if you would call it, like, people don't call the Lord of the Rings extended versions director's cuts, really. I feel like they'd call them just the extended versions. And I think that it makes sense that those exist, but I think for the most part, usually director's cuts are like an interesting experiment at best, and that's what I would call this version of Rocky 4, I guess. And I would say that, I mean, I guess we can probably roll this into our final thoughts, but I would say I really enjoy Rocky 4 as kind of this weird relic of the 80s, and I think it's a lot of fun. I feel like the director's cut is not the one you should watch first if you are, unless, I guess, you started with the Creed movies. I think that's my only caveat. I think if you're going through the Rocky movies, you should just watch the original, because I feel like it is such an interesting little product of its time, and it's fun. And I think if you meet it on its level, you'll enjoy it, as long as I mean, like, there are a lot of caveats and a lot of, you have to look at it through the lens of like Stallone at the time. And I feel like that is kind of a difficult hurdle, understandably, for a lot of people. But I do think it's fun. I think it has a great soundtrack. I think that the director's cut, again, is an interesting experiment.
I think my only recommendation for this is, like, you either have to be like really into Rocky, as in like, you know, like the series, like the lore of everything. Because if I'm recommend, like if someone's never heard of the series, I would just say like watch the first two Rocky movies or watch Creed. Like I don't really think this is like so good that like I would like recommend someone to be like, yeah, you have to watch it. I think it's more interesting as like it's like in a film studies kind of way of seeing how Cold War propaganda was made and how just weird the tensions were between the USSR and the United States at the time. 'Cause this kind of encapsulates basically like how American propaganda was about that. So I think that's really interesting. Other than that, it's kind of like you could just go on YouTube and like look up the good parts of this movie. Like that I think that's all you need to do. Like, you know, I don't think anyone needs to actually like sit down and watch the whole movie unless you're like really into the entire series and you're a completionist. I don't know. I think like we probably just have different emotional connections to these movies.
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely go watch the the training montage in Russia. And if you don't enjoy it, I think if you watch that montage and you enjoy it, I think maybe watch the movie. But if you're just like, this is kind of corny, I don't really care about this, then you probably won't care about it at all. But I think the montages make it fun enough. But I will say Rocky 5 is the only movie in the franchise that I genuinely hate, which is the next one. And I think that's the movie I would have been way more interested to see Stallone do a director's cut of, because it's so maligned and hated. I think it's really the only one in the entire series that's like really genuinely despised. And I would have been way more interested because I know that it has a whole alternate ending. Like, so, okay, here's my the last crazy Rocky fan thing I'm going to say at the end. I've watched like a work print version that someone recorded on like a camcorder of Rocky 5. Like
what?
So that's basic. I know. So it exists on like torrent sites and stuff. Okay. But it's like it's literally like a work print version. There's like not finished like text and effects and stuff, but the ending is completely different and a lot of the music is different. And I don't want to go into this for too long because it's a whole other movie. But I guess my final thing is like, Stallone, go do a director's cut of that movie. Like there's so many scenes from that and so many, I think he just hates it too much as well. Like looking back at it, that he doesn't want to look at it again. But I think that's the movie that fans and a lot of people, at least I would be interested to see like another version of it. But anyway, I guess that's my final thing that I want to say is I think that Rocky 4 was kind of fine already. I don't think it needed to be re-edited. And I think the only reason it was is because the Creed movies include Drago. But I feel like 5 is the one that he should do if he decides to do another one for whatever reason.
So here's my final thought, and it's kind of related to the movies, but not so much. It's kind of more like a precedent I would like to set going forward. There's another podcast I like watching about like movies, and the two hosts talk about how they review a lot of movies that are kind of like more like, I guess like you'd say like geared towards women. And they whenever there's like an actress or like someone they really like, they say like, oh, that person deserves to go to Fierce Cunt Island. And they just spend like 5 minutes like gushing about the person, like, oh, Kate Blanchett, she's so amazing. And then I was just thinking, we need to do our own version of this, but like Big Dick Island. And it'll just be like us gushing over like character actors or like specific actors we like. Like, remember when we were doing the Nope review and we were talking about how much we both love Keith David? Oh
yeah. Oh god, he's amazing.
Yeah, so like Keith David gets to go to Big Dick Island. Dolph Lundgren and Stallone get to go to Big Dick Island.
I think Carl Weathers gets to go too. I like Carl Weathers.
Oh yeah, they all get to go to Big Dick
Very
Island.
good cast.
But God damn it, I'm gonna shoehorn Big Dick Island into like every fucking podcast going forward, unless there's like no actor that I want to gush over.
Yeah, let's do it. That can be how we wrap it up.